As an MSP, you have a unique risk, and there is a cataclysmic scenario where a cyber breach to your entity could then result in lawsuits, right? Or one or multiple, right? So at that point, you've got cyber carrier going, that's not me, Mr. E&O carrier. And you got the E&O person going, that's not me, that's you. And you've got two legal teams and two forensics teams, and everybody's sitting there pointing the finger at each other.
Welcome back to the MSP Zone podcast. I'm your host, Charles Weaver. If you are a managed service provider and your cyber insurance renewal feels confusing, expensive, or you are just completely disconnected from how your business actually operates as an MSP, then this episode is for you. Today, we're going to be walking you through how MSPs should approach managed services, cyber insurance applications, including renewals, and what underwriters actually care about, where most MSPs get burned and where they're kind of dissatisfied, and how you should put yourself in a stronger position before your next renewal season hits. This probably applies to most of you out there throughout the world because, let's face it, most MSPs have or want cyber insurance, but it has been unnecessarily, in our opinion, difficult and often costly in terms of premiums and other types of inefficiencies. So I'm really excited to have our guest join us, Mr. Andy Runyon from UKON. We'll talk about UKON and what they do with MSP Alliance very, very shortly. But Andy is head of cybersecurity risk services at UKON, and Andy works directly with MSPs reviewing real policies, real claim scenarios, and real renewal problems, translating MSP operations into insurable risk. Andy, welcome to the MSP Zone.
Yes, sir. Thank you for having me.
By way of just bringing everyone up to speed, right? In 2008, our mutual friend, Rob Scott, over at Scott and Scott, right, now Monjur.
Sure.
He and I helped launch the very first MSP Alliance, very first MSP cyber insurance program. And that was probably 15 years ahead of its time. And
yeah, a lot has changed since 2008. A lot has changed since 2008.
It has indeed. Fast forward to today, we are really happy to be in a relationship with UKON, and UKON has now taken over as kind of the core engine of what's empowering the MSP Alliance cyber insurance program for MSPs. And so I want to talk about, well, we're going to talk about a lot of different things, but before we dive into the MSP specific stuff, maybe let's just talk about how your approach at UKON is radically different than, let's say, a carrier or a broker or an underwriter, because those are terms that people hear about, but they don't actually know about. What's the short version of UKON?
Yeah. Let's talk ecosystem a little bit first, right? I think clarity on the front end probably help out. So when most people go out and they transact insurance, they purchase insurance, they do it through a local retail broker, right? Which is a generalist. They have access to all types of line, business owners, which has got your general liability, your property coverage, right? Maybe work comp, but that all spins through a generalist retailer, right? Then you have the carriers, which are the actual providers of insurance, the policies on which, the paper on which those policies are written, which are your CFCs, your Tokyo Marines, USLIs, right? Those guys. We actually sit right in between those two in the insurance ecosystem. UKON, which was founded as Fifth Wall Solutions in 2016. I've still got my old Fifth Wall hat. I won't let it go. We were founded in 2016 as a cyber insurance specialist wholesaler. And where that's a mouthful, what that means is we sit right in between those carriers, and we deal directly with them. When we get a risk in, we take it to them. We speak directly with their underwriters, right? And then we also work with local generalist retailers. What we've seen over the last, you mentioned the changes since 2008, as cyber insurance has become more prominent, as it's evolved, the forms have changed. There's been more and more of a need to have kind of a specialist in the middle, somebody who can translate, the It's like having a Rosetta Stone almost, right? And so we sit in that middle spot where we can talk to the carriers, but then we take the policies that they give us, the quotes that they give us, and we pass them down to the local agents. And we work with local agents across the country. But we sit in that middle spot. And man, over the last, if we go back to 2008, which is almost 20 years, a lot has changed in underwriting for SMBs. A lot has changed for MSPs. And we pride ourselves on, as specialists who've been here kind of pre-COVID to post-COVID, we feel like we have our finger on the pulse of those changes.
I wish you guys were around in 2008. We could have used you back then. What a difference. Just dealing with a wholesaler like UKON, because that really changed things. And it wasn't that we had bad partners before. It hadn't evolved, right? I mean, you guys in the industry have gone through a lot yourselves over the last decade.
Right. And listen, businesses need options, right? And that's one of the key things with the evolution, excuse me, that's gone on over the last really just 10 years. I mean, when we talk about COVID, I don't speak on it from a from a political or medical standpoint. I don't touch that stuff with a 10-foot pole. Strictly from a cybersecurity and insurance standpoint, right? COVID drove some major changes in cybersecurity and in cyber insurance. Underwriting, the questions that you were asked changed. Certain carriers that had a lot of skin in the game before COVID took really bad losses. Their prices got really poor. Their deductibles went up. Their forms changed. And we entered into this market around 2021, 2022 that was extremely volatile. There were new carriers. You had your insurtechs, the coalitions, the at-bays, the cowbells, right? What are those guys about? They got some different language out here, right? And where we sit today in 2026 for both MSPs and for their customers, you need options. And one market that may be best for you, and a limit that may be best for you, and coverage that may be, curtailed to your manufacturer may be completely different from your buddy that you golf with that runs, is on the hospital board, or whatever. I mean, it's there's a much more nuanced market out there in 26 than there was even in 2019, right? Being attached to a specialist wholesaler, having those options, not being, kind of snookered into or cornered into a single product, is at the advantage of the buyer.
100% agree. I think most MSPs listening to this, watching this, would agree that the the onset of the pandemic and everything that happened seemed to coincide. What you make an assertion that maybe it was the cause of some of these cyber changes. That could very well be, but I do remember just before the pandemic, so let's say the last half of 2019, where a lot of MSPs were dealing with things like helping their clients fill out a cyber insurance application that was either a first time application or renewal. And it just started to percolate in the MSP community just how significant the challenge and the opportunity was involving cyber insurance. What do you think happened in that time period? Because my sense is there was a huge lack of understanding about what MSPs were in terms of, did MSPs actually lower risk or did they actually increase risk? What are your thoughts about that?
Yeah. No, I mean, I think what we saw, and I mean, I don't, I mean, I'm an Arkansan. I live in as rural as it gets, right? And what I saw in our area was, the pandemic and work from home, it created a lot of low hanging fruit. If you look back, prior to 2020, when we would read about ransomware, we were reading about the Targets and the Equifaxes, right? And then in 2022, and I don't want to name them by name, I was having a lunch with a buddy that runs a local funeral home in Paragould, Arkansas, which is a town of about 30,000 people. And they got ransomed, right? So that, to me, that was the shift, right? Is cybercrime shifted down from the Fortune 500, Fortune 1000 to the SMB, right? And you started seeing folks, businesses that previously thought that they didn't need an MSP. Their nephew sits in the back and plays Xbox and he knows computers, so they're good, right? And didn't need cyber insurance. Now all of a sudden, post pandemic, you're starting to see the threat actors went from trying to, whale hunt to crappie fishing, so to speak, right? To use a Southern term. And I think that shift really is what kind of fleshed all this out, right? Claims went up, the number and the severity went up. A lot of that I feel like was fleshed out by work from home and just general change in operations, right? And there was some low hanging fruit that was created there, and that created claims, and those claims created a change in underwriting, a change in appetite, a change in pricing, a change in form, and all of that happened over a really, really volatile 2 year period. Where, and I'm sure people listening, went through this themselves, but I know down at the SMB level, we saw people that regularly without losses were getting all of a sudden an 8-page application and a 70% increase in rate. And it was like, oh my God, guy, like, what did we do? Like,
with no claims.
with no claims. That's what I'm
Yeah.
saying. Yes. I mean, you would see people that would take a 40, 60, 70% rate hike and they would maybe lose some coverage. Maybe their deductible would go up. And then all of a sudden they're getting questions asked about MFA and backups and security awareness training that they've never been asked before. I mean, I remember 2021, we have a bank that operates out of our general area. They run about $250 million in revenue, not a small entity. They got asked about MFA for the first time ever in 2021 by their carrier, right? A bank that does $250 million in revenue was asked if they had MFA. And by the way, they were asked, do you have it? Yes or no? Right. Like, I mean, it was a wild time back then.
Andy, that seems to indicate to me that there was through no fault of their own, meaning, as you said, a lot of MSPs, at least in our community, certainly in our certified community, I don't recall the very many claims. It wasn't like they were just coming out every week and telling us, because we would have found it during the certification process. But it seems to me that there was a lot of other stuff going around, maybe globally, that was getting assigned, perhaps improperly, to the MSP profession that caused these spike in massive forms to complete for application or for renewal, and the premiums. Would you agree with that was something was going on, not necessarily in the MSP community, if that makes
Correct.
sense?
Yes. I wouldn't say that it was a number of claims in the MSP community. The claims were happening at the SMB level by and large, right? Then you also throw in, I mean, at that same time, man, I mean, we had pandemic, and then right after that was Russia, Ukraine, right? And I'll tell you, I'll never forget this. I was speaking on stage I was doing a panel with a good friend of mine, Mark Kirby from CISA, and we were talking about how war was evolving and changing and types of attacks were changing. And, he talked about now modern warfare was you lead with cyber and you follow with the physical, right? And they were talking about that probably 4 months after that, Russia, Ukraine, right? And the details of how that attack went down, it was almost like it was a prophetic word, right? I mean, like it literally made the hair on my arm stand up. So you have global conflict going on, and cyber warfare is becoming a thing, right? You have a pandemic that kind of fleshes out low hanging fruit on the cyber side, and you see cybercrime kind of shift down to the SMB. And I think insurers for the first time really woke up and realized what it was that MSPs were doing on a daily basis. Then you had, and again, I'm not trying to, I'll even leave the vendor out, right? Because I don't want to lay this at the feet of anybody, but we had a breach. We had an issue with a RMM tool, right? And when you go pandemic, Russia, Ukraine, and that breach all in a 18-month period, the market goes, I don't know about this class of business. You know what I'm saying? Like it did make, underwriters kind of wake up to what was going on.
You know, I knew all that, but I've never, I guess, maybe put myself in your guys' shoes, that you were reading the larger headlines on the news wires, so to speak, and saying, and how could you not come to the conclusion that of course MSPs are going to be high risk? Look, I get that. I mean, I think MSPs, and certainly my personal take is, yeah, they take the hits, but without them, and I would say this to a lot of insurance people that would call up saying, "Hey, can we work together?" And it was like, "Well, how do you view the MSPs? Because if you view them as risky, then what if we just take them out of the equation?" And they would, of course, say, "No, no, no, no. We don't remove the MSPs." MSPs because obviously they are really critical to lowering risk for their clients. You had very big issues that had to be addressed.
Sure.
Yeah, I agree
And
there.
I'll tell you, I mean, me personally, I mean, individually, there's the market as a whole, and there's Andy Runyon's experience, right? Where I have seen the MSP side of things, just from claims and things like that, I don't view MSPs risky from a ransomware standpoint, right? I view their customers risky, extremely risky from a ransomware standpoint, and that's not to lay anything at the feet of the MSP. It's as a dad and a coach, I know that my kids and my athletes don't do everything that I tell them to do, right? You know, I could give them all the advice in the world, but they may not quite turn that back foot when they swing, you know? So I really don't view MSPs as risky from a ransomware standpoint. Where this has changed, right? As cybercrime has made its way down to Main Street as we speak, right? Two things have happened. Number one, the likelihood of that MSP being brought into court because it was their fault that the customer was breached, that's increased, right? And we saw major national headlines around the Mastagny Holstep versus Lantec case. You know, I mean, that was, I don't mind saying that because, I mean, it was hell, it was on MSP Reddit. Everybody knows that case. Not everybody, but most people know that case, right? And the minute that hit MSP Reddit, I mean, my phone and my calendar blew up with MSPs going, hey man, I read about this case where a law office didn't do anything that the MSP told them to do, and they got hit and they still sued the MSP and they sued Acronis, right? So I don't view MSPs as risky from like a, hey, I think you guys are going to get hit with ransomware. I think your customers are going to get hit with ransomware. And I think your customers don't understand enough about what you do that they absolutely will drag you into court if they're not insured properly, right? And then the other side of that is the evolution of artificial intelligence and phishing kits and social engineering. I mean, we've had multiple MSPs that know better send in claims on cybercrime, right? Paying bad invoices, ladies in accounting, wiring money, people getting a hold of banking information. I had one particular MSP owner that fell victim to a pig butchering scheme that totaled $3 million, right? Like I've seen all of those things personally happen, right? So I think we fixate as a society on ransomware because we have that kind of if it bleeds, it leads, news cycle. Like we read about ransomware on the news, so that's where we fixate, right? I don't view MSPs as risky from a ransomware standpoint. I think they're some of the most secure businesses out there, right? I do get concerned about my MSP's customers getting hit and taking them to court. I do get concerned about low level employees or folks that have access to invoice that maybe aren't as cybersecurity focused, falling victim to an invoice manipulation scheme. That stuff does concern me.
Sure. Very real, rational concerns. I want to talk about specifics. Before we do, I think it needs an introduction of why the MSP Alliance UKON approach is radically different. And this hasn't really changed from our standpoint, but it has changed. It hasn't changed from our standpoint from a philosophical perspective, but it has changed from a practical standpoint because now that we have the relationship with you guys over at UKON as a wholesaler, as a, you can take your broker, you can leave your broker, it doesn't matter, right? The broker is kind of a secondary issue that doesn't get in the way of this. And then having a standards-based approach to underwriting and kind of risk assessing of the MSP in question. Let me start with how MSPs traditionally and maybe still are today being classified by the insurance community. Are they assessed as a general IT outsourcing shop, or are there nuanced approaches? And I'm asking you for your answer, but also how do you think the rest of the community?
Yeah. No, this is an interesting session. This is really good. And so let's go back to some of that ecosystem that we talked about before. I deal with a lot of MSPs that deal with agents that are really good and they know how to classify MSPs and they understand their risk, right? But I also deal with a lot of MSPs that are rural and deal with generalist agents, and that's the only MSP that they insure, right? I would say that the industry as a whole has gotten better at classifying MSPs over the year because we would see early on, I would see MSPs on legacy policies with general agents, and they would be classified as like computer sales or, like print copy. And I mean, there's a larger thing going on in the industry where there are entities that have a print copy background or they have a break fix background. And now they're, in order for their business to survive, they're shifting towards MSP or MSSP work, right? So there's number one, are you classified correctly? And the industry has gotten better, right? They ask more questions now, right? Like, I mean, like I said, that's one way where the pandemic was good is I don't see nearly as many misclassified MSPs in 2026 as I did. I mean, you don't have to be on a legacy policy with a cut rate carrier. Most people are classified correctly today, right? Where there is some nuance is around that whole shifting of the business, right? And that's where, I mean, you brought up Rob Scott at Monger earlier. That's where the legal side comes in. It's where the insurance side comes in. I deal almost weekly with MSPs that say, hey, we got this break fix background, or we have this print copy background, and we've got 100 customers, but I only have 10 of them that are on managed services. We're trying to convert everybody. It's like, okay, how are you handling that from an insurance standpoint? Have you gone back and talked to your carrier about what you're doing now and the additional exposure? Have you looked at your contracts and maybe updated your contracts to talk about what and that's honestly, that's the maturation. I was telling somebody the other day, you're almost in a better situation to be just a startup MSP right now in 2026 and just figure all that out right out of the gate, right? Than to have to sometimes go back and peel the Band-Aid off of some old wounds and be like, hey, buddy, I know you've been with me for 20 years, but I'm going to really need you to convert to this stack, and I'm going to need you to sign on the contract.
Andy, I'm going to ask you to repeat that again, because for the people at home who are driving in their car, they're on a
Yeah.
train, they're in a plane, they are at their desk working and listening to this podcast or watching it on YouTube or wherever it is. What you said is so critical because it talks about the risk of a non-managed customer, a break fix or a reactive customer in a true MSP portfolio. And I think that many MSPs have been really afraid to force the issue or have the conversation because they don't want the revenue to go. But say what you said before, because this talks directly
Yeah.
to their risk.
Yeah. Well, sure. But I mean, let's put ourselves in the shoes of the MSP, right? I mean, you have this business model that was making money before, right? It was print copy, or it was break fix, or whatever it was. And it was good. I mean, you'd established, multiple customers. Let's use that 100 number, right? And man, business is good. And then all of a sudden, about 5, 6 years ago, everything shifts a little bit, right? And now you're starting to see, folks that are coming in that are going to this managed services model, and maybe you lose some customers, right? Or you have some customers that their business is changing and they're asking questions about, hey, can you provide these services for me? You don't want to say no because you don't want them to go to somebody else, right? Well, now you end up with this hybrid customer mix. You've got these legacy customers that were under no contract, right? They were under old statements of work, or not even a statement of work. They just pick up the phone and call you when something messes up. Hey, come put some toner in my printer, right? Or whatever. And now you've got this other side of the business, right? That's growing, and that that's the future of the business, and that's MFA and MDR and incident response plans and all that fun stuff, right? So, like, how do you handle that from a legal standpoint, from an insurance standpoint? And it does. I mean, that's where, again, this is where I'm going to pull out the feather in our cap just a little bit. It's where the insurance specialist, it's where the legal specialist becomes critical, right? Is you need somebody that's able to communicate that to your insurance carrier, to know that you're classified properly, that you're underwritten properly, that nothing's left out on the table. You need a lawyer that understands the T's and C's, right? And is able to get contracts in place that protect your business, right? And it's hard, man. I like, again, put yourself in the shoes of the MSP. Like, I get it. I've got a customer that I've done business with. I've been in business since 2000. I've been doing business with them for 26 years, and their operations have changed a little bit, but leadership really hadn't. And they're still a profitable business, and you're trying to kind of pull them into, the new area. And maybe they hadn't gotten popped yet. They hadn't felt it yet. Maybe they sent a bad invoice one time. It cost them 10 grand, but it wasn't a $2 million ransomware event. Do you go to those people and say, hey, here's this new MSA, and by the way, I need you to carry $2 million of cyber insurance that you don't have right now? That's a tough conversation to have.
It is, but I think that the stars are aligning right now. That you mentioned kind of the three stool legs of MSP best practice, which is standards and certification, insurance and contracts. All those things, and all those things reflect the rest of the world, which is screaming, not just loudly proclaiming. They're screaming, get cyber hygienic and move closer towards a managed services alignment, not reactive. So I think it's a matter of time before we all get there. I want to talk about the application process and why a lot of MSPs have seen just wildly different, right? Forms that have different types of questions. There's no real consistency. Why did that happen? And why do what we present, why is that so much
Was
better? And
why is it
how does
any
that work?
different? Yeah, why is it any different? No, that's a good question. So first of all, I'm gonna take a jab at the insurance industry here. For those of you listening, Charles and I were talking before. I tell everybody, like, throw the tomatoes, the knives, whatever, right? Like, I know that we are flawed beings over here on this side, and I want to hear it all. It's how we get better. But insurance is always about 2 years behind good cybersecurity, right? Like, we are a slow moving underwriting barge, right? Like, it's hard to get turned around. A lot of bureaucracy. So when you look at the kind of how fast the industry has evolved and changed since 2020, right? Like, what's happened in the last 6 years. Insurance is slow to move and behind both, right? So what you get is, and it's a hard thing. And where I get frustrated, Charles, is when people paint with a broad brush and they like take their experience and they're like, well, I've got E&O insurance. It only cost me $800. Like, okay, yeah. How many questions did you answer? I didn't answer any. I just went and bought it, mate. And like, okay, well, so we're on this side of the spectrum over here, which is you don't ever want to carry that thing into court because it's a horrific policy, right? Now, on the other side of the spectrum here, I've got MSPs that are coming to me and they're like, man, I had to fill out 150 questions for my renewal. Is this normal? And I'm like, no, that is not normal, right? So you really have kind of two realities that exist out in the market. You have the generalist, tech errors and emissions. Maybe it has cyber, maybe it doesn't. Cut rate, really, really crappy insurance that doesn't ask you any questions. And I'll have MSPs come to me and they'll fuss about that. And they're like, man, shouldn't they care more? And then I'll have MSPs that are on the other side and they're like, God bless, I've had this insurance for 3 years with this carrier. Why am I filling out 100 questions on a spreadsheet? Right. So where we come in and we actually we're working on this today. UKON deals with multiple markets, right? As we stated before. We are currently sharpening the knife on a process, right? That'll be a digital process where we go out to all of our markets with a single questionnaire. It's right in the middle. It's not going to be none, but it ain't going to be 100 either, right? The honey hole on that is knowing what to ask. And that's what happened, man. When COVID hit and all the losses happened in the market, the insurance industry lost a ton of money. I mean, they bled for 2 years, right? And not to go too far down that road, but we're not going to get into like, I mean, guys, loss ratio, if the amount of premium that you're taking in is less than the amount of claims that you're paying out, and some cyber insurers were at like 115, 120% loss ratio, you don't stay in business very long, right? So the market freaked out and they just kind of started asking questions. Shotgun was like, well, let's hire some cybersecurity experts and ask everything, right? And so there's been this correction in the market over the last 4 or 5 years there. And now there's very much a middle ground of underwriting where you ask the right questions, not all the questions. You ask the right questions, not no questions, right? And that's where we're trying to live and evolve, is right there. And I'll tell you, it's a ongoing process. I met with we meet with our carriers on a quarterly basis. I met with a carrier the other day. Let's again go back to Rob Scott. Let's go back to MSAs, right? And we're like, hey, like, how do you guys view MSAs? And they're like, well, if the MSP is if they're under 100 million in revenue, we don't really care about their contracts. And I was like, could we maybe change that? Like, is there a way that like we could maybe give you some positive feedback on that not being a great practice? So it's definitely ongoing, man. I mean, we're working from that middleman spot to try to influence those markets to do a better job. They're doing a far better job in 2026 than they were in 2019. But man, there's a lot of overkill out there. A lot of overkill.
I agree, and that's I can't believe I'm saying this after however many years, but I'm actually glad for you guys over at UKON and the role that you're playing in not just serving the needs of our members and other MSPs out there, but also taking what you're learning and hearing from us and going to the markets and saying, look, change your products, make them better,
Yes.
align to what
Well,
the feet on the ground MSPs actually need.
well, and that's, I mean, we're always, I mean, like, tell us what good looks like. And I mean, I don't want to act like we're trying to backdoor the carriers, but like when we were talking to them, it was like, okay, what's your appetite? What do you like? What does good look like? Right. When they were saying, say, okay, well, here's what good looks like to us. Like I mean, I meet with 15 to 20 of these guys a week. Here's what good looks like to them. It's good contracts, right? Written by MSP, written by lawyers that understand MSP risk, not some local guy, not Chat GPT, not Grok. I got that the other day. I had an MSP tell me that Grok wrote his MSP. We don't want that, right? So what else does good look like? Good looks like Cyber Verify, right? Like it's a standard that tells me what do I have, what's my roadmap look like, how do I get better, right? And then taking that documentation, showing that those things have been done, and then going to the market and saying, hey, I've got an MSP that does things right over here. If you had an MSP in the same region, like let's call it California, fairly litigious state, two California MSPs, both of them do 10 million. One of them's not Cyber Verify, one of them is. One of them has Rob Scott Modular MSA. One of them doesn't. Why would they pay the same premium? They're not the same risk, right? One of them has done the work to mitigate risk, right? They should get better pricing. They should get lower deductibles. They should get amendatories that other people don't, right? And that's how we're trying to influence the market.
So it's not just, yeah. Okay. So first call to action for those of you out there. I'm not the Geico lizard here. So I'm speaking from being in this now for quite some time, since 2008. And Rob knows these, he's got some of the same battle scars that we do, we have over here at MSP Alliance, because we were fighting so much, maybe ahead of its time, but I think we now have a really good product. So if you're an MSP Alliance member, you should run, not walk, to the insurance page and go and reach out to the folks at UKON. And if you need an introduction, we'll get you there. You can call us or you can call them directly. If you're a cyber verified MSP, you should sprint, not walk, to the UKON folks and talk to Andy and go through the process, because the underwriting process is a lot easier. You're going to be treated, I mean, I think, first of all, you're going to treat them a lot differently just because you understand managed services and MSPs, but you also understand what, as you said, what good looks like. And there's going to be not just maybe a premium difference, but certainly a scope and a coverage difference that is going to be far superior. That's what I'm
Well,
hearing.
no, 100%. And so a couple of things, and let's start at the highest and then go down. I mean, like, let's go, 10,000 foot all the way down to ground level. At the 10,000 foot level, access is the number one thing, right? Like, just market access. What markets do I have access to through my local agent? What markets do I have access to from my previous broker, right? The previous program. That number right now nationwide, there are only about 15 to 20 carriers that even want MSPs. I tell people every single day, yes, we have 50 carriers roughly that we work with. Of those 50, depending on the day and the quarter, right? About 15 to 20 will write that combo tech errors and emissions cyber policy. And I mean, every MSP should have both E&O and cyber, by the way. I guess it's a different conversation, but you should have both. So there's only about 15 that offer that combo policy. And then within that, some of those carriers want larger revenue MSPs. Some of them want smaller revenue MSPs. They all have their own appetite. And then within that, of the ones that want to write in your, revenue band, you have some people that are rate competitive and some that aren't rate competitive. You have some that offer sublimits of coverage that aren't really good, that I would never suggest. And you have some that offer really cool endorsements, right? So it really, the way that it works is number one is access. You want as much market access as you can for as much competition for your business as you can, right? Then when you come through the front door and you fill out your application, you present your MSA, you present Cyber Verify, then that gives us as the specialist leverage to go to these carriers and say, hey, give us what's your base rate? Is it 12 grand? If your base rate's 12 grand, how about this Cyber Verify? Okay, now it's 9.5, right? Like, it gives us the ability to leverage price cuts, deductible or retention decreases, right? I mean, we'll see everything from we had and now this was an MSP, but we had a client come through the other day that had $1 million deductible on their policy, right? Leverage that maturity, that work to get your deductible, your retention down. And then the third thing is the type of product you are buying. There are exclusions and sublimits that have been around forever. You don't want exclusions, you don't want sublimits. An exclusion is simply where somebody has deleted coverage and says, hey, we're not going to cover that, right? A sublimit is where the policy says, hey, yeah, you got 1 million. But then if you read down here to the fine print, when it comes to cybercrime, that invoice manipulation stuff we mentioned earlier, you only have 50K or 25K here, right? So we want to try to eliminate those. And then endorsements are positives, right? And that's where the things like agentic AI come in. And I know this is a whole other ball of worms, but with AI creeping into the daily do of the MSP, we have had some MSPs that have very poignantly, very, very matter of factly said, I use AI every single day in my operations. I want my carrier to say, yes, we will cover it if that AI hallucinates or messes up, right? So that's really the levels is access, yes, pricing, yes, deductible reduction, right? But then also coverage, positive, bringing, taking out exclusions, taking out sublimits, and then add in some endorsements like agentic AI.
Andy, will you help MSP Alliance members, including cyber verified members, with assessing what their actual needs are from a limit standpoint? And I've heard it from multiple sources from different places that there are a lot of scenarios where the MSP might be overinsured. Maybe there's some where they're underinsured, but
Sure.
what do you have to say on that issue of
Yeah. Well,
right sizing?
so I'll tell you, at the end of the day, I can't. Andy Runyon doesn't set their risk tolerance, right? So, we enter. Yes, we will help them. Here's how we help them, right? Number one, we speak a lot in revenue bands, and we talk to MSPs about what their peers are doing across the country, right? We'll talk about that. One of the main things is asking them how money flows through their business, right? Specifically on that crime piece, that kind of gets tossed aside, but that's where a lot of claims are coming from. And I see a lot of MSPs that come to me with $50,000 or $100,000 limits on crime that have got hundreds of thousands in the bank and are regularly paying invoices more than what their limits are, right? So the hard one to nail down is errors and omissions, right? Because it's almost impossible to say this is how much a lawsuit is going to cost you and this is how many lawsuits are going to come from this event, right? So that's when I say that I can't set their risk tolerance. What we will do is we will sit down with them and go, hey, look, we used California earlier. You're in California, pretty litigious state, right? Home of that case that we talked about before. And okay, if you do get drugged to court, what does it look like to keep the doors open? Here's what your your premium. Here's what your peers are buying. You're at 10 million in California at 10 million. We see almost everybody at least 3 million as a baseline. So if they come through the door at 1, like, hey, to get where your peers are and see what's going on in the industry, you need to get up to 3. Now, if you're at 10 million in revenue and you're carrying 10 million because of a contract, I'm going to come in and I'm going to say, where'd they get that number from? Right. And we will help and have helped push back on that a little bit because, excuse the French, but a lot of those contractual requirements are lawyers pulling numbers out of their ass, right? Like it's just kind of hey, 10 million for this one. They don't really have any precedence there. So yeah, there is definitely an ebb and flow there. We want to put them in a revenue band at their state or their location or their operations where their peers are and educate them on what's going on with their peers, right? And then there is an open conversation about, hey, based on what we see in the industry, we think you might be a little underinsured here, or based on this contract, we think they're asking too much of you. We actually need to fight that a little bit.
May I assume that our friends over at Monger, there's a lot of cyber verified MSPs who use Monger, and would it be safe to assume that if they indeed use Monger for their agreements, that they would be able to, that they might already be using some contractual devices to help what you just said, which is lower that premium and maybe right size it to something a bit more normal? Is it fair to say?
Yes. Yeah. And I would say nationwide, to that, yes. But nationwide, the issue is not getting people down, it's getting people up, right? If you look at, if we go to, I'm gonna third party this out, Sophos report from 2024. By the way, for anybody listening, I have no ties to any vendors. These are just really good reports that have come out, right? Sophos report at the end of 2024, the NetD report that came out last October, both of them paint a very similar story, but they do it different and like statistically different, which is the average person that has purchased cyber insurance and has filed a claim has only made about 60% of that claim back because they don't purchase enough insurance, right? So really the move here at the MSP level and at the SMB level is to, man, like the size of breaches has grown. The average size of a ransomware event, the average size of a funds transfer fraud, invoice manipulation has increased exponentially over the last decade. People are not necessarily adjusting their insurance limits to that. They don't sit and ask questions. It's hard to quantify, right? Because they're underinsured and because those numbers are going up, MSPs are now at increased risk for litigation because the client's not made whole by their insurance, right? So that's generally what we're trying to do. It's not that we're trying to sell infinite amounts of insurance. It's that $40 million manufacturer that's been on a cyber endorsement for 20 years. That's 40 million in revenue now. They were 5 million in revenue when they bought it, and it has $250,000 in limits now. Well, guess what? Your exposure is no longer $250,000. If you get hit, you need two, three, $4 million of insurance. That's generally the move that's going on.
All right, but definitely a conversation MSPs ought to be having
Sure.
with maybe not their
Somebody.
broker, because yeah. So
Somebody.
which
Yeah.
leads me to my next question: brokers. The old version of the MSP Alliance program definitely would have said, "Look, you have to use the broker that administers the program." I don't want to speak ill of that, but I think that caused a lot of MSPs who had existing relationships with another broker that may be local to them, who maybe sells them general liability, a business owner protection and policy. Talk to us how now that we have UKON and we're working with you guys, how does that change if they have a broker or maybe they don't have a broker?
Yeah. So I kind of do what we did before. Let's put ourselves in the MSP's feet or in their shoes first, right? If I'm an MSP and I've got a local agent, local broker, right, that does all the things, and let's throw them in the middle. Let's put them in Springfield, Missouri, right? And I've got a local bank or a local broker that's got some agents. They do a really good job. They've insured me forever, right? And then I'm asking about, hey, I've got this new relationship with Rob Scott, and man, some things are happening in our industry. Like, do I need to change my insurance? Because man, MSP work has really evolved over the last 5, 6 years, right? And I get that 10,000 foot stare from a generalist agent in the middle of nowhere, Missouri or Kansas or Oklahoma, right? Because they just don't know, right? At that point, that MSP is put in sort of a crux. I can go to a specialist, right? And I can separate my E&O and my cyber, and I can put it with that specialist that really understands what I do, but I may wound or sever a relationship with my local guy who I was a fraternity brother with, I play golf or drink beer with on the weekends. Maybe we're referral partners. I mean, here's
Huge.
where it gets
Yeah.
really deep, right? Is maybe that agency passes me business. Maybe I send him some business. Maybe we work together, but I know that agency doesn't really know MSP E&O, right? Previously in the program, there was that binary choice of you either have to leave your agent or you have to stay with your agent. You have to make that sacrifice, right? Where we sit today, again, UKON is appointed in all 50 states. We have agency relationships across the country. As a wholesaler, the process is simple. Put us in touch with your agent. They sign a broker agreement, which costs them $0. It's just contract. So on the insurance side, nobody gets their hands, or wrist slap. They sign a broker agreement. We go out, we shop your policy, we take it in, we place it through your agent. They're licensed. We can pay them some commission. They put the policy in place for you. You keep your agent. You get the specialist in UKON. It's really as simple as that.
So an MSP Alliance member has, or don't have, but in this scenario, they have an existing local broker relationship. They acknowledge that they don't understand cyber. They don't want to get rid of them for other reasons, like you said. The lead generation, I think, is hugely influential and probably very prevalent, right? Because I've heard that before. you are not going to force them to leave. You will work with
No,
them at no cost to
that's
the
it.
broker. They can easily work with the UKON folks to get to basically just make this happen without any
That's it.
problems.
That's it. And then to the flip side of that coin, I'll have MSPs come to me that are ready to fire their agent into the sun because of what we talked about, right? They'll come to us and they'll say, "We've asked these people over and over again, what do we need to do with cyber?" And they give us a 1-800 number. What do we need to do? Is the ENO actually MSP ENO? Give us some examples of claims. Talk to us about how we need to, what limits we need to buy. And they just keep getting no answer. And they come to us and they're like, "Dude, we're ready. I'm ready to leave this guy." So that's where we brought Brawley Insurance into the program, right? So we do have a retail partner. If you are an MSP that wants to come in and you want cyber and E&O, but let's say maybe you got a fleet of vehicles and you want business auto insurance. By the way, not cheap these days, right? Like that's an expensive line item for some MSPs. You need work comp. That's where if you do need a retail agent, we're not going to write that. UKON's not going to write that, but that's where we brought Brawley with us to help with those.
So if you have a broker relationship, we can
Bring
still
them on.
work with you and support you. If you don't, we can still
Cool.
work with you and support you. That's the
Yep.
takeaway.
Choose your own adventure. A child of the 90s, right? Remember those books where you're like, if you want to chase the dog into the woods, go to page 26. Choose your own adventure, man. You can do whatever you want to with us.
No, I love it. I love it. Let's talk renewal, Andy. It may not be the same as like getting or changing your car insurance mid policy term, but there's a lot of MSPs who are out there who are already thinking about it. I want to give them some practical advice for what they should be doing. What's your opinion or advice on renewals? Should MSPs come and talk to you, 8 months, 6 months
Yeah.
before?
Yeah.
Can they terminate and sign up with the MSP Alliance UKON program? What's your advice?
Yeah. So I would say any MSP, if it's been 2 or 3 years since you've really dug in on your policy, look at it right now. We do a free review, right? At no cost to the MSP, nothing binding. You're not getting a quote. We'll sit down with you for 30, 45 minutes and I'll walk you through not just the policy. We've got a full risk management spectrum. We talk about insurance. We talk about contracts. We talk about your stack. How do you deploy it? Well, is it a la carte or, all of that stuff fits together. And then we'll talk about, end customer insurance. So we'll spend about 30, 45 minutes. We'll look through the policy. Here's where the industry polices itself a little bit. This is actually a good thing for MSPs, right? If there is not a material deficiency with that policy, meaning it doesn't have an exclusion, it doesn't have a sublimit, it's not missing coverage, it's not misclassified, I can't move it midterm because it's a professional liability policy and you should have a prior acts date, right? So it's just like medical malpractice, right? Anytime that you have a professional liability policy, you can't move that in the middle of the term just to go save 20%. There has to be a material deficiency. So this happens to me all the time. I had a guy come in recently and he had errors and omissions, right? And he had just a smattering, a little bit of cyber. And we really got into, the crime piece. There was no crime coverage. Reputational harm, which is a key coverage for MSPs, no reputational harm. There was a dependent business interruption is one where, if you don't have a breach, but let's say one of your vendors does, let's back to that RMM tool thing, right? Like if that happens, right? No coverage for that. That's a material deficiency. So that gentleman's policy didn't renew for another 6 months, but we took him out to the market right then to patch those cyber gaps, right?
Those common, by the way?
Extremely common. I would say that so here's what we deal with over half of the time when I take a policy in. The most common is they have E&O, but they either don't have cyber or they have poor cyber. That's the most common, right? We will occasionally run into where there is E&O, or excuse me, there is cyber, but there's no E&O because, we started the call today. We were talking about cyber insurance, right? Well, technically, right, it's E&O and cyber. So if and we'll get this sometimes, they'll go to their agent and say, hey, we need cyber insurance. And the agent doesn't know that E&O is supposed to come with that for an MSP, and they end up with just cyber. The one that scares me the most is when, and some people on the call may not think that this is a big deal at all, but we're dealing with this right now. I've got one carrier or one MSP that has E&O with one carrier and they have cyber with another carrier, right? They started
Seems
off
dangerous.
It is extremely dangerous. They started off their business and they bought E&O right out of the gate, right? Because they knew they needed to have professional liability. And then cyber kind of dawned on them later through their broker. So they added it, and the broker put with two different carriers. I'm not going to name the carriers. Well, here's the deal. As an MSP, you have a unique risk, and there is a cataclysmic scenario where a cyber breach to your entity could then result in lawsuits, right? Or one or multiple, right? So at that point, you've got cyber carrier going, that's not me, Mr. E&O carrier, that's you. And you got the
Go to
E&O
the other
person
one.
going, that's not me, that's you. And you've got two legal teams and two forensics teams, and everybody's sitting there pointing the finger at each other. So that's a thing that we see from time to time. And then honestly, I mean, we see people that don't have anything at all. They've just kind of had head in the sand, or maybe they're waiting to get the finances right, or whatever the reason may be. I probably the one that has been the most jaw dropping for me. And again, I'll leave the names out, to protect the innocent. But we saw a satellite location of a large MSP aggregator, right? That their name is on that shop, and that individual satellite was operating without E&O and cyber insurance because it was not contractually required by the aggregator. And I'm sitting there and I'm going, man, somebody has missed something over the years, right? Like there's all kinds of risk to the individual, to the entity, everybody, right? So yeah, it is, I would say a little bit more than half the time, probably about 60% of the time, we see something come through that has a material deficiency that we can move immediately. If there's not a material deficiency, you ask this, I would say about 90 days out. That's probably, I mean, if it's we just started May, right? Ideally, we would start working on like August renewals right now, ideally. So about 90 days out, we have the conversation, we get the app filled out, we get the documentation, we take that out to markets, and we start looking at pricing for the next year.
But that's assuming that that's a no material breach, no material defect
Efficiency. That's
in
right.
the
Yes.
existing policy.
Correct. That's it. Yeah. If they're looking to up limits, if they're looking to get better coverage, better deductible, let's go back to that agentic AI thing, right? Like, let's say you're with a carrier that's either AI negative or AI neutral, and you have a heavy AI exposure within your MSP. You may want to move to a carrier that says, we will specifically cover agentic AI for errors and omissions, right? In that scenario, there may not be anything wrong with the policy. You may just want to get a better policy. You may want to find a little bit better coverage, or, a better price. That process for us, I mean, anything inside of 30 days is going to put us in a crunch, right? Ideal is 60 to 90 days.
Okay, so earlier the better. Don't wait to the last minute. I hear that a lot, like end of year, right? It's December 1st. I need to get a quote because my cyber insurance policy renews on January 1. Go talk to Andy and the folks at UKON. Don't wait, because if you do have a material defect in your existing policy, as Andy said, you might be able to jump mid-policy and get onto a better policy. And why wait? Why jam yourself up and make things more difficult? That's the way I'm hearing, is just there's no reason not to start this process very early.
The end, like I said, the industry polices itself. I tell people all the time, we don't create fires where there are none. And like in this scenario, like if you have a solid policy and I look at it and I go, this is pretty good, there's not anything missing, I can't do anything with it, even if I wanted to, right? Until the renewal. So yeah, just getting eyes on it. And again, for anybody that's listening, guys, listen, insurance is highly relational. We see that. I'm from Arkansas, I'm Charles down in Texas. I mean, like we live in areas, a lot of us live in areas where our relationships mean a lot to us, right? That was highly critical to this program. We are not trying to supplant your local relationships or your local agents. We want to work alongside those guys, right? So leave that up to us. We can get through the T's and C's on the insurance side, but I'll tell you, for them, it's pretty painless and it doesn't cost a dime.
All right. So call to action, folks. If you're an MSP Alliance member and you have cyber insurance, maybe you don't have cyber insurance, it doesn't matter. If you want it, if you have it, run, not walk, to our website. Look at the insurance page. You'll find the information that will take you eventually to UKON. You're going to talk to Andy and his team. They're going to get you squared away. if you're cyber verified, there is no reason why you should not be immediately talking to Andy and his team to make sure that you have the best premiums and the best coverage for your MSP practice, because you're going to go through a much different, much better approval, underwriting, review process than you would ever imagine, just because that's what good is. That's what excellent looks like. And that's what Andy and his team are actually wanting to see, because it makes his job a lot easier, makes your job ultimately easier, and you get a better product for a better price. Andy, I mean, I'm
Yeah.
sure we could
Yeah.
probably have like a couple
Yeah.
more sessions,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
we've
Yeah. Yeah.
covered
For sure.
very little, just the
Sure.
surface on
Yeah,
this.
scratching the surface. No, I mean, I first of all, just kudos to you guys and Rob for the job that you've already done. I've been working with MSPs now for multiple years, right? And got a background in it. Just kind of stumbled my way into it down here in the South. Jokingly have said that in the land of the blind, the one-eyed man's king, right? But through my relationships with CISA and some of my MSPs, I've been in these conversations for years. The community as a whole has been looking for exactly what you guys are doing. Guidance on how to get better, standards, right? Answers on their legal contracts, answers about how to get better insurance or get insurance, get viewed differently in the eyes of underwriters, right? I- I'm just excited. I think back to one of my first conversations with an MSP years ago where they asked me, how do I become a better risk? How do I lower my insurance rate? How do I look better in the eyes of the insurer? And I was going, cut some revenue. Tell your largest client that's a healthcare entity to leave and go somewhere. I mean, there wasn't really an answer to that. We're still a long way away from perfect, and that's what guys like. Listen, you will learn if you work with us. You will learn that we are far from like the rainbows and butterflies, folks. Old coach, raised by a coach, like pretty direct. We are a long way away from this thing being perfect, right? But we're getting better, and it's a deal where you can take your cyber verified documentation and you can take your new MSA and you can place that in the hands of somebody that can in turn leverage that into the market and get you a better product. And that was not the case 5 years ago.
Well, I appreciate that, Andy, and I will say that I am really um, super thankful that we ran across you guys, and I don't remember how we connected in the beginning, but I'm glad that our stars aligned and that we are now working with the fine folks at UKON, because I can say that near 18 years ago, right? So March 31st, 2008, at MSP World in Atlanta is when we launched that first cyber insurance program, and that version to today's version with UKON, it's light years better. It is a far superior experience and set of products and approach to this very complex issue. And I finally feel like we have a real running shot at. I don't think you ever get perfect, but we're certainly a lot closer to perfect today than we were
Yeah.
back then.
No, it's awesome. And we're thankful to be a part of it. If anybody that has any questions, I mean, reach out to Charles and his team. Guys, you can find me on LinkedIn. I'm a pretty laid back guy when it. I mean, I know I crazy shirt or not. I mean, I'm super passionate about this stuff, but I have the benefit to sit and talk to on most weeks 15 to 20 MSPs a week, like I mentioned earlier, and I'll shoot you straight. We've got vendor partners. I mean, we've got tons of market access. We've already worked. Charles, we had one MSP Alliance member that had a very, very specific ask about his insurance from something that is atypical in the industry, right? From a limit standpoint, he understood his risk very well. And we had to take him to a back corner of the market. Now, it was a good carrier, but there was literally one carrier that was willing to say, yeah, absolutely. We'll do the limits like this. And yeah, send us over that MSA. And da, da, da. So we kind of had to, and we ended up delivering him exactly what he needed. So we'll shoot you straight. We're not gonna try to push a singular product down your throat. Yeah, happy to meet with anybody and kind of meet them where they are.
Yeah, no, that's awesome, folks. Let's make Andy's calendar fill up really fast. Call, email. You can reach out to him directly or the UKON team. You can come into mspalliance.com and you'll eventually get to Andy, and go give it a whirl. And I think you will be very, very pleased. I know you will be very pleased. And Andy, thanks for coming on to the program. And I'm sure we'll have you on and in the future to talk about other insurance related stuff, because there's a whole portion of the iceberg below the waterline that we haven't even talked about, dealing with like claims and things like that that are really important for MSPs to know about. And we should
That's where
bring
we
that
need
to
we
the.
need we need Mr. Scott in here as that third leg, man. We can get him in and talk about some of these courtroom stories that he's heard, some war stories. I would love to have him and pick his brain.
That as soon as we are done, I'm going to email that to him, and we'll make
That's
it
next.
happen.
Yeah,
Guarantee you,
that's
we'll make
great.
it happen.
All right.
All right, Andy, good talking to you. We'll talk to you later.
Yes, sir. Thank you.